You often hear the claim that the Book of Acts is just Christian propaganda. It's a carefully curated pro-Paul document that is meant to smooth over the real tensions between Paul and the original apostles. Paul never met Jesus during his earthly ministry. He claimed a private revelation on the road to Damascus. He supposedly reinvented the faith from the outside, and Acts tries to paper over the cracks and make everything look like it was unified from the start. But if Acts is just theological fiction, there is a big problem for the skeptics. The author gets way too many real-world details correct. Things that don't serve any obvious theological agenda. Things that would have been almost impossible to fake unless he had actually been there. Let's walk through 7 different examples from the second half of the Book of Acts to show you exactly what I mean. First, Lydia of Thyotyra. In Acts 16, Luke mentions in passing that Lydia was a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyotyra. That may sound like just a throwaway line until you realize that it's absolutely spot on. Thyatira was a well-known center for the purple dye trade. Archaeologists have discovered at least 7 inscriptions from the city confirming that very industry. New Testament scholar F.F. Bruce explains it this way. The people of that area were famed for their skill in the manufacture of purple dye extracted from the juice of the madder root. This was still in use there for the dyeing of carpets at the end of the 19th century before it was superseded by chemical dyes. Luke also casually notes that Lydia was in Philippi, where a guild of purple sellers is attested by an inscription. There's no big theological payoff here, just a casual, historically accurate detail. Second, Paul's walk from Troas to Asos. Acts 20 says that Paul decided to take a walk from Troas to Asos while the rest of the group took the ship. That seems really weird. Wouldn't a boat be faster? But actually, it wouldn't. Geographically, this makes perfect sense. The ship had to sail around Cape Lectum, which was a long and very dangerous stretch of coastline. Paul could have walked the shorter inland route and beaten them there. Historian Colin Hammer points this out. Paul staying behind at Troas and traveling overland to rejoin the ship's company at Asos is appropriate to local circumstances where the ship had to negotiate an exposed coast and double Cape Lectum before reaching Asos. Luke doesn't explain this seemingly odd walk, he just reports it because it likely actually happened. Third, the port of Petara. Acts 21 says that they found a ship sailing for Phoenicia at Petara. What Luke doesn't explain but gets absolutely right is that Petara was one of the key ports for the Alexandrian grain fleet. It was a very natural place to find a ship heading toward the eastern Mediterranean. Hemmer again notes, Petara, like Myra, was a port used by the Alexandrian corn fleet. Both became important places of transshipment, and imperial granaries were built at these 2 ports under Hadrian. Luke also uses the correct grammatical form of the city's name, neuter plural, matching how it appears in local inscriptions. That's not the kind of thing that you just guess out of thin air. Fourth, Roman citizenship for sale. In Acts 22, Paul is about to be flogged by Roman authorities when he drops a bomb. Is it lawful for you to flog a Roman citizen? The tribune is stunned. He says, I bought this citizenship for a large sum. Paul responds, but I am a citizen by birth. Now, this is the crazy part. The Roman historian Cassius Dio, writing about this very period under Claudius, confirms that Roman citizenship had been available for purchase, but at increasingly lower prices. Dio writes, though the privilege was at first sold only for large sums, it later became so cheapened that it became a common saying that a man could become a citizen by giving the right person some bits of broken glass. Luke doesn't explain this giant price drop. He doesn't need to. The line simply fits. Fifth, Paul before Ananias. In Acts 23, Paul is struck in the mouth at the order of the high priest Ananias. Paul fires back, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. Then someone says, would you revile God's high priest? And Paul replies, I didn't realize he was the high priest. That line has puzzled a lot of people. How could Paul, a Pharisee trained under Gamaliel, not know who the high priest was? Josephus fills in the backstory. Ananias had been previously appointed high priest under Herod of Chalcis, but was sent to Rome under charges during the governorship of Quadratus. Although he was acquitted and eventually returned to Judea, he never officially resumed office. Instead, Jonathan succeeded him until he was assassinated in the temple. After that, the position remained vacant for a time until King Agrippa appointed a new man, Ishmael ben Fabi. So during the events of Acts 23, there was literally no official high priest. Ananias was just the former one, still acting like he held the office. That means Paul's line, I didn't know he was the high priest, could very well be a deadpan job. Like saying, yeah, that would make sense, but guys, we all know that it's not. Josephus supplies the exact context that Luke never spells out, and it lands like a perfect puzzle piece. 6. Felix and Drusilla. In Acts 24, Paul speaks before the Roman governor Felix and his wife Drusilla, who Luke notes is Jewish. Josephus confirms she was the daughter of Herod Agrippa I, making her part of the Herodian dynasty. She was originally married to King Azizus of Emesa, a pagan ruler. Felix saw her, he wanted her, and convinced her to leave her husband and marry him instead. Josephus says that she transgressed the laws of her forefathers to do it. So, when the Apostle Paul starts preaching to them about righteousness, self-control, and the coming judgment, Felix becomes suddenly alarmed. Yeah, he absolutely would be. Luke's account and Josephus' history align perfectly, without any need for embellishment. 7th, the shipwreck and the island of Cauda. Acts 27 gives a detailed account of a storm at sea. Luke says they were driven south of Crete by a northeaster and ended up near a small island called Cauda. Turns out this is an accurate description of what the wind would actually do, but what's even more interesting is that ancient sources like Pliny the Elder and Ptolemy got Cauda's location wrong. Pliny places it 90 miles far to east. Ptolemy dislocates it entirely. Colin Hemmer says this: even Ptolemy makes a serious dislocation to the northwest in a position which would not suit the unstudied narrative of our text. Luke gets it absolutely right. Not because he studied maps, but because he was actually there. This is where skeptics will start to cry, uh-oh, you are committing the Spider-Man fallacy, Eric. Just because New York City is a real place doesn't mean that Spider-Man exists. So let's just play that out. What would it mean if Acts were fiction? It would mean that the author somehow gathered all these obscure, region-specific, historically accurate details without Google, Wikipedia, or ChatGPT. He would have had to invent Paul's travels from scratch, pretend to be his companion, and then just casually scatter all these accurate facts about trade guilds, shipping routes, dialects, legal customs, and weather patterns into the story just to make it feel authentic. All this in a literary genre that didn't exist for centuries. Then the author then sends this extremely detailed fake history to somebody who probably hadn't visited the locations and wouldn't even be able to verify most of it. And the examples we've looked at are just a tiny sample. Hemmer identified at least 84 distinct historically testable details in Acts, from overland routes, coastal landmarks, to provincial boundaries, shipping patterns, local cults, titles of local officials, legal procedures, languages, dialects, and even regional slang. The best explanation for all of this data is that Luke was really with Paul, as he describes, and would have been able to talk to the Jerusalem witnesses, showing that they really are on the same page after all. Acts is a real history of the early church. If you find these videos helpful, feel free to check out my Patreon and consider joining. You'll get early access to videos before they come out, be a part of our private group chat, and you'll help me to continue to put out content that spreads and defends the gospel. Thank you so much for watching.